More than $1 billion has been given to a Palestinian Aid organization that's now under investigation for helping Hamas terrorists carry out the attack against Israel on October the 7th. This all according to OpenTheBooks.com. And as a result, the Biden administration announced it was joining 17 other countries and suspending any more funds to the United Nations Relief and Works Agency for Palestine Refugees, or UNRWA. Israeli officials do say at least 12 agency employees participated in the attack. UNRWA, though, employs as many as 1,300 members. Joining us this morning to break down the numbers is founder and CEO of OpenTheBooks.com, Adam Andrzejewski. Good morning to you, sir. I want to start with the fact that the funds for this group had previously been frozen by the Trump administration. That was the first time those funds had been stopped in 72 years. Now, when President Biden took office, he did begin using taxpayer dollars again to fund the agency. So what's the history here? Why did Trump freeze it, and why did Biden restart the aid?
Trump froze Palestinian aid because he was concerned that it would be siphoned off to terrorist organizations. He also said that he didn't think that the Palestinian Liberation and the Palestinian Authority were honest brokers in the peace process. And Trump said if you weren't interested in peace with Israel, then you didn't get our money. And so he cut him off. Well, the PLO, they actually made the argument that U.S. taxpayers have an obligation to fund the Palestine subsidy. They made an argument that they're entitled to U.S. taxpayer money. And sure enough, 3 months into the Biden administration, he restarted that Palestinian subsidy. To date, they've put $1.2 billion into Palestinian aid through this UN agency.
Let's dig into the investigation of these UNRWA employees and also the reason why the more than 7 countries stopped giving aid to this agency. What happened?
So last week, the Israeli intelligence agency provided a dossier to the Biden administration that showed up to 50% of the 12,000 United Nations aid workers in Gaza had close family members that had close ties to Hamas or other militant Islamic organizations. And up to 1,200 employees and staffers were actually members who, or they themselves, had close ties to the organizations. Then they showed that 13 of these staffers at the UN aid agency participated in the planning, logistics, or weapons procurement for the October invasion of Israel by Hamas. There was 1,200 Israelis that died that day in the most deadly days since the Holocaust. You had 6 of those employees actually go into Israel on the waves that killed the 1,200 people. You had 2 of them actually kidnap Israelis. You had 7 of these UNRWA employees that actually teach in the UNRWA schools.
You know, when President Biden restarted this aid, Secretary of State Antony Blinken said there were no guarantees the aid would not fall into the hands of terrorist organizations. Were there any steps taken to ensure that our taxpayer money does not end up in the hands of terrorists?
Well, even memos in the ramp up to the restart of that Biden aid in April of 2021, in March, emails show that Biden bureaucrats were concerned that if you restarted that Palestinian subsidy, it would end up in the hands of terrorists. Now, Biden publicly said in May of 2021, trust us, we have stringent policies and procedures in place to prevent the siphoning of that aid. For example, they do background checks on the UNRWA employees. They run their names up against known lists and terrorist entities. They share the staffers' names with other governments. But make no mistake, Jan, this is a failure on our State Department to properly vet, and they've unwittingly obligated the U.S. taxpayer in the funding of terrorism.
Clearly, there was a reason why the funding was stopped previously. You did break the news on the funding numbers last fall here on the National Desk. I do recall us talking about this very issue. How did the Biden White House react when you talked about the numbers and the funding?
Well, not well. They tried to get news organizations and our organization to back off the report. They said it's not a simmering issue. We're unfamiliar with this. And they tried to, and they were successful in some regard in trying to squash the story. But it turns out we were 100% accurate on the funding, over $1 billion, and 100% accurate, obviously, that the funding could be siphoned off by these terrorist organizations.
Yeah, because even after the October 7th Hamas attack, the administration, as you rightfully pointed out here, continued to provide UNRWA with millions of U.S. taxpayer dollars. How much continued to flow?
Yeah, and this is a bad part of the story. So even after the October 7th attacks on Israel, the Biden administration sent an additional $121 million to this UN aid agency. Only last week did they follow the lead and finally freeze the money, but the majority of the budget for 2023 was already out the door. They were only able to freeze a paltry $100,000. So the damage has already been done.
Founder of OpenTheBooks.com, Anna Mingievsky, always good to see you. Happy Friday. Thanks for joining us.